Hello and welcome back to the next episode of Techs of the Roundtable. This is episode 6 on June 7th, 2025. With me today, I have some returning guests, Boucher and Nick Soulos. Just as a quick aside before we dive into things I do need to disclose, I've actually changed organizations. I no longer work at the MSP that I used to work at as the Director of Cyber and CISO. I am now a technical evangelist for SentinelOne. So this podcast does predate my position at SentinelOne, and all thoughts and opinions shared here are my own. Now, to dive in, I just started at a new organization, just started a new job. I want to talk a little bit about changing roles in IT and cyber. I am not the only one here today that has just recently started a new job. Pierce, you also just started a new job, right?
That's correct. I have. Thanks for having me back, by the way.
So what are you doing in your new role?
Well, my new role is pretty similar to my last one, but it's an internal role now. So I'm still an IT manager. I think the internal title is technically IT service manager. I'm responsible for anything corporate IT, basically. So we have about 800 users in the org. The company's they're a software and hardware product company at the end of the day. So they deploy devices to various locations and manage those devices with their own in-house software and support teams. So that's kind of the business model, and I'm responsible for pretty much anything infrastructure or help desk as far as that goes. Spent a lot of time getting exposed to the DevOps team and SRE teams, which apparently we work pretty closely with to keep everything tip top. So, but yeah, it's a nice shift for me. I haven't quite worked in an organization that large before. I was with a client that was pretty large, but we were so siloed that, or I don't know if we were so siloed that it feels much different now, but it definitely feels different. The scale feels different than other organizations I've been at before. So I'm really excited to kind of keep grow into that larger role and that larger team, and really excited to be managing a larger team as well.
Nice. And so you stepped out of the MSP space. You're not in
Yeah,
the service management or the service provider space anymore.
correct. I stepped completely out of the MSP space. Like I said, it's a completely internal role now. So and we don't use any contractors at all in at this company. So that's an interesting shift from my previous engagements for sure.
From being a contractor.
From literally being the contractor. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Well, so and on my side of things, yeah, I also stepped out of the MSP space. I also stepped out of the practitioner space, which has been a significant change for me. So I'm no longer responsible for running cyber programs or running an IT team. In my role, my key primary purpose in this role is really to create cybersecurity content and thought leadership, and I'm going to be actually publicly speaking a lot more, which is going to be a big change for me. And that leads right into the topic that we had for the podcast today, which is change in the workplace, how to navigate it, and some tips, some tricks, and how we go about dealing with it. And now this can be change that is in your current role, like just within your organization that you're at currently, or when you're changing roles between organizations and how to address that. I want to kick it off, and I'm going to open it up to you guys to kind of opine on this further. But my take on change in the workplace is being adaptable to change in your current role or when you're switching into that new org. It really enables growth for you. You need to be adaptable and open to change, because if you're stuck in your ways, that's how you really become stagnant. And if you want to take that a step further, driving change in your role, being a change leader, being up at the forefront, leaning in to change can really help boost your career. That's my take on change. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, change is a constant. That's kind of a good way to think about it. Things are always going to be changing, especially in the IT and cyber spaces. So I think being adaptable and open to change is honestly one of the core, it's a core mindset that everyone needs to have in this industry.
Well, and particularly, like you called out that particularly this industry, IT, cyber, tech, it changes, it evolves so rapidly that if you're not ready for it, if you're not adapting to it, I mean, you're really falling behind at that point. Pierce, what about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for me, change is necessary because it's part of what keeps me engaged, right? So I think that at least me personally, I need it, right? I can't. I need either the environment to change or to change environments literally, right? Or move, so that maybe whether that's a new job, literally just getting a new job or shifting around like in the MSP space, being able to work in multiple different environments and kind of keep things fresh that way, right? So for me, I require change for sure. I think that it can definitely boost your career if done properly, right? At the same time, I don't think you want to change too much, right? The things change fast in IT, right? So in that way, you do want to change, right? You want to change. You want to be growing your technical knowledge with the new platforms that are coming out, with the new products that are coming out. But in that same token, I think changing. You don't want to change so much that you're never able to actually become an expert in one particular area, right? At least that's how I feel. So often enough to keep it fresh, but not often enough that you can really sink your teeth into what you're working on.
Yeah. Well, and also coming from the management perspective, because you're leading a team, there's an ethos out there that's something that I've employed prior as well, which is when you go into a new team that you're managing, don't make too many changes right out of the gate. Spend some time learning how the team operates first. Don't go in day one or week one and say, all right, I don't know how you guys do all of this, but this is how I like to do it, and so this is how we're going to do it. That's just not the right approach. What do you have you made any changes? Because you're what, 2 weeks into your new role, Pierce?
Yeah, just about 2 weeks. Yep.
Yeah. How have you really started making any major changes yet?
No, no, no. There are some things that need to be changed, right? For sure. But yeah, like you said, you can't, at least in my opinion, can't really walk in and just be like, all right, this is the way we're doing it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if some of those things do need to be changed sooner rather than later, right? You still need to. I think context is really important for that, right? Just figuring out what the priorities should be, right, before you start making changes, but also understanding what the impact of the changes will be, right? I think that's one thing that's why you don't make changes early on before you've kind of figured out what the environment is like, what the team is like, and what they've been doing so far, and how that ties into your approach, right? So I think you really need to spend that time before you can make an informed decision on what the right next step is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and especially in leadership, when you make decisions in leadership, sometimes you're making decisions that you're not going to know the outcome for another 6 months, 9 months, a year, even. And so, really understanding the environment that you're making changes to becomes even more important at that stage. But also, this whole conversation, what we're talking about is you driving change within your organization, which just goes back to the upper level topic of you need to be ready for change. You need to be adaptable to it, and in many cases, at the forefront of it. Now, what about dealing with a new environment or a new job? What are some tips or tricks that you guys have used to kind of get settled in whenever you guys start a new job?
I mean, I always like to kind of approach things from the mindset of like I am a completely blank slate. So I am just here to absorb as much as possible. Just, be quiet, sit there, learn as much as you can, as fast as you can. And I mean, I think that's really going to be generally the best way to approach a new job or even just, yeah, a significantly new environment. If it's not necessarily a new job, just try to absorb and understand as much as you can so that you can make the most informed decisions about how you want to approach things moving forward.
Yeah, go and being a sponge.
Yep.
Just soak it all up. No, I completely
100%.
agree.
I also completely agree. I think that's pretty much the only way to do it, right? Like it kind of comes back to the same point I made earlier, which is you can't go in making changes, right? You have to absorb. You have to get the context, right? Build the relationships. I think that's something for me that I do when one of the very first things I start doing is identifying which people I need to be building relationships with, right? Who has who has the power in the org? Who are the decision makers, right? And what are the important departments in that way, right? Like who are the departments that we work with every day, who lead those departments, right? And who's actually making the decisions, right? So
Exactly. No, and
yeah,
that's a really good point there, and that's one of the points that I wanted to bring up as well is relationship building. Um, when you start a new role, you want to start building relationships with your team, with anyone that you're going to interact with, and you want to really hit the ground running with that because the people on your team, that's your team. They're there to help you, and you're there to help them, and all in this effort of this main goal that the organization is driving towards. And so, starting to build good relationships with those around you is really important. And then on the piece of what you said around the decision makers, absolutely. Finding the people that have a lot of tenure, that have a lot of impact within the organization, and starting to develop relationships with them can really help you boost and accelerate how quickly you feel settled in, how quickly you have built some allies and some coalitions within your teams and within the organization to better support you in the effort of completing your job role, or when you do get to the spot where you're pushing change, you have some of that back end support. It's a lot of
exactly.
reputation building too.
I've actually encountered that directly already in the environment. There's some of the folks on the team, I have told them kind of about what my goal, my vision for, specific standards and processes that we have. And something I feel like I keep hearing is, oh, good luck with that. Right. And I'm just thinking, right. Like, just you wait, right. Just you wait. I can prove the power of building relationships very easily. So
Oh, yeah,
I'm looking forward to the chance to actually do that, right? Put it into practice and show to the team that that's something that I can teach you guys how to do as well. Build those relationships, identify the right people to put in the room, and get stuff done, right? So
exactly. Well, and you've already met some resistance. You're hearing the good luck with that, stuff like that. Those are the people that may not be as open to change. They may not be as ready to see this new direction of this new idea. But by building your coalitions, by building your relationships and your reputation at the new business, at the new organization, you can build the momentum, the inertia that you need to actually push through the changes that you want to push through. And this can go from small changes all the way up to larger changes as well. Um, that's where one, you get to show some of those detractors that no, we can make this change, and this process does work. And so, no, that's awesome. Now, Nick, you have been a little bit of a change leader yourself in your current role. I wanted to hear a little bit more about that from you.
A little bit, yeah. So, actually, it was about a year ago. Finally, I got buy-in from all of the stakeholders, everything, and was able to implement phishing simulations for our organization. So I've been running those quarterly since then. And yeah, getting started out with that process was interesting. That was kind of my first time really having to, navigate and take ownership of a organization wide project that I was having to, advocate for and pitch, get the senior leadership buy in and everything, and coordinate all of that. Work with balancing the the desires of senior leadership, our point of contact there, versus you know being able to get good actionable data from the results of these campaigns and helping to secure our environment. So that was a big learning experience for me also, because like you were just talking about, Pierce, I also had to, learn and focus on building those relationships and getting those to a good place where, I can have those kind of candid conversations about what is needed, what I need specifically for this project and what the organization needs to be healthy moving forward. And since then, I've continued to work with senior leadership and have actually also implemented um, phishing simulations for new hires within their first month of starting as well. So we're running those as well. And even I just did the most recent one a couple weeks ago, and our results have been consistently getting better.
Excellent.
The organization is, everyone's performing better. They're now more aware of various types of phishing threats. So I'm very pleased with the direction that everything has gone since then.
Yeah. So,
Have you guys seen? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Pierce. Go ahead.
Sorry, I got really excited.
Go for it.
Have you guys seen any change in either like attitude of the end users or anything that on like the metrics side, on the service desk side, that shows the users are doing better or learning more from the phishing simulations that you set up?
Yeah, as can be expected, there was definitely some pushback, with the first one. A lot of, some, not a lot of, but some end users maybe were feeling deceived or tricked or not happy that, now they had this training that had been assigned to them that they had to complete. But even, yeah, the organizational buy-in has only gotten better. Um, People are, they're learning how to use the proper reporting channels for suspicious messages now as well, which is good. That's something that I've been trying to focus on. And yeah, everything has just been steadily climbing, really.
That's awesome.
No, yeah, no, that's excellent. And starting a phishing simulation campaign or a program at a business is definitely a big change. You are sending fake, malicious, or phishing emails, benign in this scenario, but attempting to deceive or trick your users in an effort to raise their overall security awareness, raise how critically they look at and think about email, and it can do a serious it can really improve the overall security of an organization just in a slight increase in the overall security awareness of the user base. Now with that, you had already talked about, Nick, like kind of building some of those relationships. What you were doing there was you were also building your reputation. You're building your reputation as a security focused IT specialist, as a security focused and skilled individual that could help the organization bolster their defenses. Talk a little bit more about the pushback that you got when you were initially kind of trying to bring this about, like when you wanted to get the phishing campaign started. What type of feedback did you or pushback did you have to navigate through to actually get it done?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, kind of the most obvious answer is, we don't want people to be scared of answering emails. We don't want the training to be taking up too much of their time away from their other duties. That was it. And also, there we did have, basically specific certain vendors or topics that, senior leadership did not want touched or used for a phishing simulation, because we needed to basically, keep those lines of communication as high priority as possible. And so that they're not, messed with. People aren't hesitant to handle those types of requests. But it a lot of it was that, and the impact of training, because our org is not huge, but it's a good size. There's about 1,000 end users, and a lot of them are. I mean, they're all spread out very widely across the area that this org operates in.
Mm-hmm.
So it it could be a bit tricky to coordinate all of that across everyone, but just having to push through and be able to demonstrate to senior leadership like why it's important that we're doing this, and what I'm able to do with the the data and the results that we get, and how we can take it and keep incrementing on it and just building a stronger and stronger security posture.
Yeah. So a lot of intentional communication around that, as well as really focused on buying or in capturing buy-in, so that you can get the change pushed across. Now, I wanna take a little bit of a side side quest here and talk about phishing, because you had mentioned something in there around like certain topics were off limit. I know that you had to adjust some of the difficulties and everything like that, especially as you were first starting. Now there are two sides of this coin in security. Now best practices generally say you don't want there are certain areas of when running a phishing campaign that you don't really want to enter into. You don't really want to deceive your users to such an extent that they lose trust in the IT and cybersecurity team, they become jaded, anything like that. So, like we heard, especially during COVID, there were some things around organizations sending out phishing emails around like stipends for work from home because everyone was had to work from home when it was really a phishing email. And it was really writing that line of like, this really could be a legitimate email. And they used it as a phishing campaign. And that caused some damage between the business units, essentially, the cybersecurity business
Yeah.
unit and the other production business units. On the flip side, threat actors don't care. Threat actors are going to use whatever advantage they can to compromise an environment. And we also saw a massive spike in legitimate phishing emails and phishing campaigns run by legitimate adversaries that were doing things in that same neighborhood during COVID.
Yep, absolutely.
What do you guys think is the right split there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you stole the words right out of my brain, basically, with a lot of what you just touched on, right? When Nick mentioned that there are topics that he kind of needed to avoid, or he needed to discover what those topics were. That's exactly what I thought of, is like, threat actors don't care, right? It does not matter how many topics you are or are not trained on. They are going to find the ones that work. And so if you're not training on them because they work, well, then you might get got, right? But at the same time, I agree that you want to establish that trust, right, with the user base, with the executive leadership, because if and you may break trust a little bit if you don't get their buy-in to the topics that you want to train people on, right? Especially when it comes to like what styles of phishing you may see, or who might be spoofing. Like, I've worked in orgs where they don't let us spoof HR for phishing, which is like one of the most common attacks that we see that actually works, is an internal email being spoofed, right? So there's a line you got to walk, for sure. I completely agree with you. But at the same time, if you can if you can show those people that are saying, hey, maybe we should not do this or that as far as a topic, then I think, for me, you can prove to those people that you should be doing it, right? You can prove that to them with numbers, right? With evidence, right? Examples of real emails that have gotten people in your organization, right? That were either saved through another means or something like that. So I think there's ways to get that buy-in, even if people are pushing back, but you're not always going to get it at the same time. So you have to be prepared for the reality of, well, I can't really do this implementation to my standard, but communicate that, right? Let those people know that are the decision makers that this is what your standard is and this is why. And if they choose not to adhere to it, that's okay, but let it be known, right?
Yeah, let me unpack that really quick too. So you said you're using like legitimate phishing emails that have been used against the organization before to help capture buy-in to use some more challenging campaigns. So right there,
Absolutely.
using some evidence to capture some additional buy-in. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that still doesn't capture the buy-in that you're looking for, intentional communication of risk. Hey, this is not the standard that I would normally like to run this at. This is not difficult enough, I feel, to adequately train our user base. And making sure that decision makers and company leadership understands that they are also accepting a risk in not performing or not enabling you to run the campaign at a more difficult level. Making sure, and it, especially with business leadership, it all loops back to risk. what type of risk are they incurring? Do they know that they're incurring that kind of risk, and are they okay with it? And sometimes, yes, accepting a risk is an acceptable answer when dealing with risk management. Yes, you can accept a risk, and oftentimes in our roles when we're in cybersecurity and when we're in IT, it is not our decision to make if we are going to accept certain risks or not. Obviously, we are coming from an angle where we want to mitigate or minimize that risk wherever possible, but at the end of the day, it's really up to the decision makers. And so the last thing I'll say on that specifically is, if you are in that spot, just make sure you follow up with an email. We call that CYA.
Get it in writing. That's what.
Yeah.
Always get
Yeah.
it in writing.
Nick, you said one thing that I wanted to touch on. I really I liked that you said that you talked about how it gives you the opportunity to keep making it better, right? When, like, with the data that you get, you can keep iterating and, keep developing the platform. I think that's really important. I often get lost in that myself, where I don't continue iterating. I perform a project and I'm like, project's done, right? Happy with that. And I forget to maintain it, right? Not necessarily, not like, let's talk, I'll just throw one out there, right? Like a network implementation. You implement some new switches, firewalls, things like that. We did that at a site recently, so good example. Not talking about like keeping the switches up to date, right? Or setting up alerting, but like tuning the alerting, not just setting it up. Or, developing some other things that we have as a part of our subscription plan with with the support package for the devices, stuff that comes with the software that we might be able to leverage better, security tools or things like things that weren't part of the original scope that can make the implementation better or more consistent, or just in anything in that scope. So I think iterating is crazy important, and I frequently will get lost in the trap of like, man, I haven't really been keeping up with that project now that we've deployed it, right? We haven't been either I don't know, like Intune can be a good example. You have a ton of configuration profiles. Are you going through them and, managing them, right? And actually making sure that you delete old ones so that it's not confused, or that they're clearly labeled, or that the scope groups are set either accurately or in a way that makes sense, right? Maybe you could develop a better group implementation plan. So that's kind of what I mean. And I think that you got to do that stuff. So it's awesome to hear that you're like, all right, we got it set, but now what data can we use to make it better, right? To train people better, or to focus on topics that they're not as good in, or whatever that might be. So
Iterating. That's a great call. And it kind of it's something similar to what I was going to say as well, which was, you've continued to iterate. A tip that I would have for navigating some of those content blocks, where, hey, we don't want to do this content in our phishing campaigns, or hey, we don't want to go too hard on our users in any specific area. Most phishing campaign platforms that you might be using enable you to do some custom phishing campaigns. Start to build them custom. If you can't make it hard based on the content type or the content area, make it really, really hard to discern that it's an actual phishing email. Make your users really think about it. And then you can stay within the content areas that are greenlit while still increasing the overall difficulty.
I haven't that the increasing the overall difficulty is something that thankfully I have had success with and have been able to do, but there have still been, some concerns about, you can't make it look too good or too real.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I'm still continuing to navigate, but I fully agree in regards to the customization part. Like I've been crafting these payloads myself custom ever since day one. So
awesome.
that's been a very important part. And I'll base it off of, actual phishing emails that I'm seeing come into our environment. So
that's great.
It's easy to, pick something that's relevant, that is actively targeting our end users, and then turn that into a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Nick, what you should do there is you should say, hey, you go back to your company and say, how about this? Threat actors, they're all using ChatGPT now. How about I just create a phishing campaign where I use ChatGPT to create the email? And that's exactly what we're seeing happen is the increase in the threat of phishing because of a generative AI that can develop an email for you that's perfect grammar, perfect spelling. There aren't any of those flags. And so that may be an avenue if you are still hitting some headwind on making the emails seem too good. Well, okay, I won't make them. Let's have a generative model make it, because that's what real threat actors are doing.
That's a really good idea, actually. I think I'm going to pitch that.
Might as well, right?
Cool.
It might help you get some more difficult phishing campaigns out there. Now, another topic that I wanted to talk about today, in light of Pierce and I both changing jobs recently, is a feeling, as a syndrome that a lot of people feel when changing roles or changing jobs: imposter syndrome. Now, this is something that's really common in tech. Pretty much everyone that I've spoken to at that is in the industry, IT, cyber, related industries, at one point or another, they have felt some level of imposter syndrome. And for those that may have not have heard it before, imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomenon or imposterism, is a psychological experience in which a person suffers from feelings of intellectual and or professional fraudulence. In regular English, it just means that you don't feel secure in your skill set when you change it to a new role. Maybe the organization made a bad call. Maybe you don't have the skill sets that you really think you do. Maybe you oftentimes, and I've definitely felt this when I've been feeling imposter syndrome, you feel like they're going to find out that you're not as good as they think that you are. Stuff like that. It's really just a hit to your confidence when you're in a new role, because it's new, everything's changing, and you're not sure. It's the imposter syndrome that makes you feel like you're not sure in your own abilities, when in reality, you've been there, you've done that, you have a lot of experience. That's why either the company hired you or you got that promotion. And yeah, sure, you're new at the job, you're going to make some mistakes, you're going to mess up a few times, you're going to be a beginner for a little bit in the new role. But it doesn't always stop that feeling, that impact to your overall confidence. Now, have you guys felt imposter syndrome before? Maybe what have you used to deal with it, if you have?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly felt it before. Even still fairly recent. So I guess for some context, I travel maybe, let's say, 5-6 times a year or so on average, for work, for, not to get into too much specifics, but essentially, kind of specialized on-site projects that generally take about 3 days or so. And it's all fairly different from my normal day-to-day workflow. So adjusting to that was certainly an adjustment. But thankfully I had, a colleague with me who was kind of guiding me, showing me how to do that. But for about the past year or so, I've been starting to lead more of those myself, or just doing them completely myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was obviously very nerve-wracking at first, but it's still nerve-wracking. Like, I still, get nervous thinking, did I forget something? Did I not configure this, switch or this one security appliance properly? Like, what is the fallout going to be once I get back home, get back to the office, and then realize, oh crap, I forgot to do XYZ or something like that. But I just, I keep reminding myself, like, hey, you have already learned this, you've done this well, and I've set myself up for success by kind of building that foundation of having the right mindset to approaching problems and problem solving, and just knowing that I can always fall back on that, and just know, okay, we just start at absolutely, ground zero and work our way up. Like, I'm confident in my ability to work through those problems if I just kind of take a step back, pause for a little bit, and really think about what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. No. Okay. Good tips. So, like, slow it down, reflect a little bit. What about you, Pierce? Have you felt imposter syndrome before?
Yeah, 100%. It less lately, I think, but I think that's due to the fact that I'm making smaller jumps these days. For me, I think imposter syndrome has a lot really manifests specifically when I make big changes in my career and in my life. Um, like I think the last time I can remember professionally speaking was probably when I started managing a few years ago. That was a point for me where it was a really big shift, a really big jump, right? In to actually managing a team and being responsible for an environment instead of just taking ownership of stuff that you're not actually responsible for at the end of the day. It's so much easier to take ownership when you still know that it's going to be somebody else's name on the paper if that breaks, right? So way easier to take ownership in those cases, in my opinion. But when I became responsible for it, I was like, "Oh, am I actually good enough to do this?" Like I thought I was, but now I'm looking at it and I'm looking at my name on the paper, and I don't know if I'm that good anymore. All of a sudden, right? So, I think the pressure associated with it definitely gets me a little bit. But the way I try to deal with that is really leaning on my mentors was how I got out of it last time. Letting people that I respect tell me that actually no, you are right, and in a certain way, you want to find it's not great to maybe associate all of that with other people, right? And the you have to ground some of that in yourself. But that is how I found that grounding in myself was listening to the people that I respect tell me that I could do it, right? And then sitting down and be like, all right, well, if they think I can do it, I can probably do it. So let's let's reassess here, right? But also it comes with time, right? Being a sponge and learning are two big things that really help me work through those type of issues is because I love learning. So, and the more I feel like I know about a topic, the more informed I am on it, the more comfortable I am just naturally, right? So, if I can figure out a way to put myself in a position to just learn, I can move past the feeling of not, you know, being prepared or being ready to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. You and I had several conversations while you were going through that.
We
You
did.
know, I
Thank you for
I
your help, by the way.
absolutely my pleasure. That's because that's one of the things that I use too is talking to mentors.
It makes a big difference. It
It
makes a
really
huge
does.
difference.
Now, I'm going to monologue a little bit here because I've been looking
Hit it.
forward to addressing imposter syndrome on this pod for a minute. I have a long history with imposter syndrome. I'll give the audience here a little bit more of a insight into kind of my background a little bit. I started as really I had already been doing IT for a few years, but really in lower end jobs, some sysadmin work, some help desk stuff like that. When I was 20, I stepped into my first engineering position. When I really stepped into that role, that was my first bout or first understanding of imposter syndrome because I went in first day as I think it was an associate engineer. I was 20 years old, and I was just completely outclassed by everyone else at that company. I had so much to learn, and so in that time, I just drilled in, just like you said, Pierce. Be a sponge. I ended up spending a lot more time of my free time doing trainings, doing learning as much as I can. Got some certs, stuff like that, just to really drill in and upskill so that I could feel like I was at the level that was at least adequate to be playing with this team, to be on this team and doing the work that a lot of these other engineers that I was partnered with were doing. Now, I made a few jumps in between in that organization that I was at. This was still when I was at an MSP. Moved up eventually, but after about a year and a half, 2 years or so, I'd made it up to senior engineer at that point, really just being a sponge. Started managing, started leading a team, and I had the opportunity when I was, I think I just turned 23, and I got the opportunity to manage a SOC. And so I was responsible for 24/7 monitoring of several different clients all across San Diego, as well as nationally. And that was a big jump. Not only was I then responsible for a team, which was still relatively new, I'd been doing some like leadership, some supervisory roles in engineering prior to that. but I was now responsible for a full team. And on top of that, I was responsible for the monitoring and security and the security alerting, incident response for an entire portfolio of clients. And that was really one of the times where I got the biggest hits of imposter syndrome. Was, in all reality, I was still pretty young. I was 23 years old at the time, and I still had a lot to learn, but I was put in a position of so much responsibility. And that was when I really started to develop my process. And I'm going to tell you my process that I have, and I've really dialed it in here in just a little bit. But that was my first I got hammered by imposter syndrome. It was a couple months where my confidence cratered. Got through that, moved into my next role, which is IT managing. Felt pretty good to get back into the IT space after been managing the SOC for a while, and got a little bit of imposter syndrome there, but it was a little bit more comfortable because I knew IT, I knew how to manage a team. My team was pretty small, it wasn't too bad. But then once I started moving up, I moved up to enterprise services manager, where I was then leading a team of experts. I wasn't necessarily leading an IT team, but I was leading a team of our top technical talent that we had at the service provider that I was at. And that I definitely got hit with imposter syndrome, because I'm now, at this point, I was 25 and I was leading a team of 6 or 7 people. Most of them were in their 30s or 40s. And so definitely felt some again, going back to the quote that I read earlier, professional fraudulence. Like, do I really have the skill set, the experience that I need to be here? Or are they going to find out that I'm really not as good as they think I am? And then I moved to director of cyber at 26. And that was a big hit as well, because then I'd moved from now just leading teams, and I was still consulting clients and stuff, but now as the director of cyber, I was consulting executives. I was working with a lot of executives of clients to help them, guide them on their entire cybersecurity program and their architecture of their cybersecurity solutions. That's a lot of responsibility. And again, at this point, I had the skill set. And I can look back at it now and be like, yeah, I was definitely prepared for that role. I had that skill set. But in the moment, it just hit me, and I was like, oh, do I have the skill set? And I started the self-doubt started, my confidence cratered. And so now let me tell you guys about the process that I've baked out over the years, that I've really drilled in, that has helped me shorten the overall length of imposter syndrome for me. First pillar here, and it goes right back to what Pierce was saying, mentors. I have 5 or 6 mentors at any given time. When I'm going through change like this, when I'm going through imposter syndrome, I'm talking to them almost daily. I'm just checking in with them. Sometimes I just need them to say, hey, no, you have the experience. You know what you're doing. You're fine. And sometimes I need to come to them and I need to get more specific advice. But leaning on people that have more experience than me, that can help me see through some challenges. The second pillar on that are books. I've found that I really do enjoy. I'm a student of learning, really, as well as a student of leadership. And so I revert, and I have a few core books. I listen to audiobooks. I'm not like sitting down to read them, but I have audiobooks that I listen to. And I have a few of them that I listen to every time I feel imposter syndrome. And then I add on a few more. They're always self-development books. They're always leadership books. The few that I listen to every time, and I encourage those that want to follow this process to find your own books that really help you. But my North Star is the 5 Levels of Leadership. I listen to that every time I feel imposter syndrome. I also like Start With Your Why from Simon Sinek. 5 Levels of Leadership is John C. Maxwell. Start With Your Why, Simon Sinek. Leaders Eat Last is a good one that I've also that's also, I believe, Simon Sinek. But find the books that work for you. And what I found is those books just help recenter. That's how I ground myself. Is I ground myself in what I've learned from these books, where I feel I am in comparison to the teachings of these books as well. And that always helps bring me back down to earth a little bit. And then the third and final pillar of this process that I use is it's just a phrase, and it's something my former boss gave to me that really resonated and really stuck with me, and it's kind of become part of the process as a result. Be okay with being a beginner. Be okay with being a newbie, being a beginner for a little bit, and just work that into your mind of, I don't need to be as good as they think I am right now. I don't need to show up and be this perfect person in this new role. Like I have it dialed in and all this experience. When I'm stepping into a new role, most of the time that's new to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot there to learn and to develop out. And so that is why being okay with being a beginner, giving yourself permission to be a learner for a bit, not to be perfect for a bit, and just reminding yourself of that. It's going to be different for everyone, but that resonated with me and that really stuck with me. And so whenever I feel that, I just kind of remind myself, hey, I just need to give myself a little bit of slack. I'm a beginner in this new role. I'm here to learn. I'm not going to be perfect. And just reminding that, grounding with the books, and then communicating actively and consistently with my mentors and getting their advice. Those three things have helped me get imposter syndrome. I think the first time it really hit me, I was down for a couple months. It really cratered my confidence for a couple months. Now I've gotten it down because I have this process. I think the last time I felt imposter syndrome, I had it taken care of in 2 weeks. I had kind of gotten through it, leaned in a little bit to the discomfort, be a beginner, but it helped me expedite and get back to where I was feeling confident. And confidence is such a critical thing in any role, especially in IT and cyber, because a lot of times what we have to do is, one, we're either making changes on systems where we have to have confidence to implement that change, or we're trying to capture buy-in from stakeholders to make changes to systems or to make changes to processes. And you need to present yourself as confident in those decisions, because the last thing you want is to be giving off an uncomfortable or not a confident vibe to your stakeholders when you're trying to get them to purchase a new security solution.
But also, if you're not even confident in the solution, you probably shouldn't be implementing it, right? So
Exactly. Well, but that's the whole thing with imposter syndrome. I've become very, very competent in certain tool sets and in certain solutions and certain architectures. But with imposter syndrome, that's where the self-doubt comes in. Is I'm doubting that I am as advanced or as familiar with whatever I might be recommending. So it's a little bit of that false doubt that you're dealing with there too.
Right. Well, that's what gets in the way of your true confidence in the product or in the platform or in the solution, right? Is it literally just stands in the way of it. So, yeah, well said.
Any last thoughts on imposter syndrome, gentlemen? No. All right. Well, I want to.
Up very well there.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to me monologue a bit. I got a lot of thoughts on imposter syndrome. Like I said, I've felt it so many times throughout my career. I've been lucky enough to have some really great opportunities in my career that have let me move up fairly quickly, and what comes with that is just the imposter syndrome and needing to adapt and adjust to the new role. And so got plenty of tips. If any listeners out there are ever interested in any book recommendations, feel free to reach out. I have a ton. I've listened to a ton of leadership-based books, and I think that they are a great way to help develop your sense of leadership, your leadership style, as well as expedite or catapult your career forward. Now, we're at about 50 minutes, so I think this is the perfect place to wrap it for today. Thank you, both of you, for joining. A little bit more of a change focus but relaxed podcast today. Any last thoughts or shout outs that you guys have before we wrap this up?
No, just thanks, guys, for a great discussion as always. Thanks for having me back, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much again. And yeah, I mean, to kind of just, I think, encapsulate this whole discussion we've had here into just, a phrase: embrace change. Just embrace change, and that will, change is like a river. it's gonna happen one way or another, and you are individually are generally not powerful enough to stop it on your own, and it will be much easier if you learn to embrace it, go with the flow, and learn how to navigate the river of change instead of trying to plant your feet in the riverbed and fight against it.
Yep, exactly.
Well said.
Lean into change. It's worth it, and you'll see dividends paid out for it. All right. Well, thank you, both of you guys, for coming on the show. Thank you to our listeners, and tune in the next couple weeks for our next episode.